Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our monthly webinar for early learning and care contractors. This webinar is being presented by the California Department of Education's Early Education Division and Fiscal and Administrative Services Division. This webinar is being held on January 17, 2023, and is scheduled to run from 4 p.m. until 5 p.m. We are recording this webinar, and we will be posting it to our website. We will drop that link in the chat, which is https://www.cde.ca.gov/sp/re/ELC/COVID-19.ASP. And with that, I'd like to welcome Stephen Profiter, Director of the Early Education Division.
Thank you, John. As John mentioned, my name is Stephen Profiter. I'm the Director of the Early Education Division at CDE. Welcome to our first monthly webinar of the calendar year. We've definitely gotten ourselves off to I'd say there's many parts that are wonderful and absolutely busy, and I think there's a sign of some good things to come. I do want to take a moment to extend our thoughts and our absolute best wishes to everyone who was affected by the storms. I heard we had, I think it was 9 atmospheric rivers in the last month time period. That's an incredible amount, and many of our families have been impacted by loss of housing, power, and other tragedies. So it's really important for us to remember to have patience and grace as we move forward together this year. And just a plug, if you're joining us here as a state preschool program contractor and you've been impacted by storms and need support, please reach out to your early education consultant in the program quality implementation office so we can figure out how we can best support. I do want to take a moment to extend our appreciation to all of you for your grace as we've worked hard together this last year. And particularly during these times, it's important to remember to find time to take that breath, relax and appreciate the effort and work we've all put forth. So as I mentioned, this is our first webinar of the calendar year, and we just want to thank everyone in all of our programs from the bottom of our heart for all of your dedication to the children and families of California. Your love shows up when as you show up. And so it's I don't know, we've got a ton of appreciation for that sustained effort, which is born out of love. I do also want to express my appreciation for the team that you see on these webinars and the team members you may not see. These webinars and the work you see from the team doesn't happen without the love and respect that this team has for the work and for all of you. We will continue to host monthly webinars as we move further into the year, and we will keep everyone updated on the next webinar date through an email that we'll send out to on our distribution list. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to Virginia Early to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Virginia Early, Administrator for the Policy Office within Early Education Division. Thank you so much for being here on our webinars and your engagement in working to make our programs in California work for children every day. We definitely can't do this work without you. My office is lead over issuing guidance and working with the legislature and the administration to ensure that priorities and needs from all of you are addressed and elevated. So thank you for doing that with us. And we're working hard behind the scenes on additional guidance to implement the last budget. But we'll be talking about some pieces related to this year's proposed budget, as well as some upcoming webinars. At this point, I will now turn it over to John, who will be our moderator.
Great, thank you, Virginia. So good afternoon, everyone. As Virginia mentioned, my name is John Osis, and I'm an education programs consultant in the Universal Pre-Kindergarten Implementation and Support Office here at the Early Education Division, and I'll be your moderator for today. So to help answer your questions and to make this webinar run smoothly, we have a great team with us here today. From the Policy Office, we have Virginia Early, Jennifer Osbaldo, Danielle Davis, Mai Tao, Amirath Mala and Eddie Tamimoto. From the Program Quality Implementation Office, we have Richard Miller, Amy Sylvia, Cassandra Lewis, and Nadia Kersey. From the Early Education, Nutrition, and Fiscal Services Office, we have Corey Kahn, Kate Washington, Yashima Daniels, and Alan Lynch. From the Applied Data Research and Evaluation, we have Carly Nodohara. From Administrative and Fiscal Services, we have Nikki Nignia. From the Early Education System Improvement Office, we have Alana Pinsler. From the UPK Implementation and Support Office, we have Shana Berklos Vasquez, Katie Modielen, and Stacy Aganostopoulos. And lastly, from the Director's Office, we have Angela Data. I also want to warmly mention our Technology Services Division, who ensure that our Zoom link is live and working. They help ensure that there is closed captioning available for you to utilize during this webinar. To turn it on, you can click on the CC button on the bottom right of your screen. Our team is committed to being as responsive as possible, and we will not be able to answer every question. Just a reminder, our chat box is disabled. CDE will be able to share links with you there, but you will be unable to chat with us. Please utilize the Q&A feature to ask us questions. Next slide. Now we'll take a look at today's agenda. The Policy Office will provide an update on the various budget-related items from the Governor's budget proposal, which was released January 10th. This includes Universal Transitional Kindergarten updates, California State Preschool updates, and some other investments as well. After this, we remind folks after the upcoming sessions, which include webinars, technical assistance sessions, and a Universal Pre-Kindergarten workshop. And finally, we will be taking time to receive questions and provide answers to as many questions as we can live. While we work through these questions in real time, we'll visit some questions that have come up through the Q&A function, as well as others that you may have lifted up through other modes. As we do with each webinar, we will take any unanswered questions and work on answers to post as FAQs on our website. Now I will pass the mic to Virginia, who will review the budget updates.
Perfect. Thanks so much, John. And again, hello, everyone. So many of you are probably very excited to hear, if you have not heard already, what is in the 2023-24 Governor's proposed budget. So that's the budget that the Governor is proposing for the fiscal year that starts July 1st, 2023 and ends June 30th, 2024. So we also know that we just want to flag that if you have questions as we go through, feel free to put them in that Q&A feature. We haven't gotten any so far yet, so if someone could just type in one thing, just help us. Okay, good. It seems to be working. All right. Thank you, everyone. So let's speak to the budget. So overall, the governor released the budget January 10th, so last Tuesday, and his administration is projecting that the state's revenue outlook will be substantially different than it has been in the last few years. Specifically, the governor's budget projects an estimated budget gap of $22.5 billion. What this means is that there's less funding to go around. However, despite this shortfall, education has remained relatively flat in terms of the investments proposed for it, and there were only a few adjustments. And with regards to early education, the investments made in the past have been sustained and even slightly augmented in some places, with one deferral of a planned investment from this year being deferred till next year. And we'll talk about that, that specific thing around TK preschool facilities in a few minutes. But just as an overall, for those of you that maybe are new to the budget process or would find a refresher helpful, typically the governor releases a proposed budget in January 10th, and it's sort of budget summary. And we'll put the link to that budget summary in the chat, along with the link of the governor's announcement of that. And the details around these proposals are released February 1st. So those will be released in a couple weeks. And that trailer bill language that's released February 1st expands on the governor's proposals. So we'll see more details about the proposals at that time. And keep in mind that until the legislature votes on something and the governor signs it, it is not the law. So these are all proposals. As part of that process of the legislature deciding whether they want to enact something or not that the governor has proposed, they hold hearings. So those hearings will begin February 21st and continue through April 18th for the early education pieces. And so oftentimes people ask us, how can we share our thoughts? And so it's a great idea to tune into those hearings, offer public comment, share your perspective, because that's how perspectives from the field can be elevated and one way for them to become part of the conversation. And so, you know, any questions you have about any of that, we really greatly appreciate all of the perspective we receive from all of you about the budget proposals. So with that being said, let's go to the next slide, getting into the specific proposals. So there is a lot around the next year of UTK implementation in the budget. So in addition to sustaining previous investments around TK expansion or transitional kindergarten expansion, there's $690 million to fund the second year of TK expansion. So that will go from children with birthdays. Right now, this year, it's children with birthdays between September 2nd and February 2nd. So that will go September 2nd and April 2nd. So additionally, there's $165 million to support the addition of more staffing to support the 1-to-12 ratio as TK expands to serve more children. I mentioned that there was a delay in some funding. Last year's budget included language expressing the intent to appropriate $550 million in 23-24 for facilities. And the governor's proposal is, instead of doing that this year, that those facility funds would be delayed until 24-25. So that is the proposals for UTK. On the next slide, we'll go into the proposals for CSPP. So a couple things here. First of all, CSPP is, despite the shortfall in the budget, CSPP has not been cut. In fact, there are a variety of additional funding investments for CSPP. The budget is allocating $116.3 million, and that's to cover the cost of additional children needing that exceptional needs adjustment factor. As the requirement for serving children with disabilities, the percentage increases to 7.5% starting July 1st, 2023, that will, all of you will have more children with disabilities in your program as that percentage goes up. And so there's more funding to cover the cost of those adjustment factors for those children. Additionally, there had been some federal funds in the California State Preschool Program that had supported rate increases that were effective last January. And because those federal funds are expiring, the state is putting general fund in so that rates don't decrease when the federal funds expire. There's also $763 million to support the preschool classroom assessment scoring system, or CLAS. That's a proposal that we expect to learn more about as we get that trailer bill language in February. And finally, there's an 8.13% statutory COLA to all of CSPP, which is, I think, a historic high, definitely the largest one I can ever remember seeing. So So that will definitely affect state preschool. On the next slide, we wanted to highlight a couple other things related to the governor's proposed budget, specifically around early literacy, because there's a real connection with our work there. So there's $250 million to build on existing literacy coaches and reading specialist grant programs. So last year's budget put some money into this, and this year's budget put some more money into this, as well as $1 million to create a literacy roadmap. And we'll again see more details on those proposals as the language becomes available starting in early February. On educator workforce, the budget highlights the investments that were made in previous years, around $3.3 billion in educator workforce. While the governor hasn't included additional investments this year in educator workforce, there was language committing, indicating commitment to continuing the multi-year investments that have been made, as those are really critical to addressing things around the workforce. As well as the budget is also continuing to provide funding for universal school meals, so that and the additional enhanced meal rate. So that is going to be a huge benefit to children. I'm now going to pass the mic over to Carly. I'm sure many of you have questions about the budget pieces, so happy to dive more into that in the Q&A as well. All yours, Carly.
Thank you, Virginia. So for some background, Assembly Bill 131 allocated American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funds, to provide support such as stipends, rate increases, and rate supplements. To date, the CDE has allocated ARPA dollars through the $600 per child stipend allocations and in non-LEA CSPP contracts for rate increases. Originally, contractors were required to complete the CDE ARPA survey for all sites in order to receive their $600 per child stipend allocation. Contractors who received or will be receiving ARPA funds were previously required to submit the survey, which allowed the state to meet federal reporting requirements. However, a second ARPA survey was subsequently released by CDSS for purposes of collecting additional information from contractors. Please note that CSPP contractors must complete the second ARPA survey, even if you do not have a CDSS contract and even if a response was previously submitted. A forthcoming email regarding the second ARPA survey will be sent to all CSPP contractors very soon, so please keep an eye out for that, and please carefully read this email as it includes specific instructions on how to successfully complete the second ARPA survey. Additionally, the CDE will be issuing rate supplements in the near future to all contractors. We also want to apologize for the potential workload burden created by asking contractors to submit or resubmit their responses to the ARPA 2 survey. However, we appreciate your consideration so that we may provide your stipends as quickly as we can. So I will now turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Carly. Sorry, I have all these windows open and was trying to move over so I could unmute. Okay, so I'm going to talk about upcoming webinars, sessions, and events that we have going on. So this Thursday, January 19th, from 10 in the morning until 11:30, the Early Education and Nutrition Fiscal Services Office, or EENFS, will be hosting the webinar for Child Development Provider Accounting Reporting Information System, CPARIS, Contract Earnings Calculation. This webinar is intended to discuss information related to the deployment of contract earnings calculations in CPARIS. Information will include an overview of the system, including a review of password best practices, user roles, and where to find information. It will include a review of the process to certify and revise CSPP enrollment, attendance, and fiscal reports. And it will include an in-depth review of the new CSPP contract earnings calculations in CPARIS. Additionally, we will be holding another technical assistance session on January 25 from 3:30 until 4:30. This session will be on Management Bulletin 2301 and the changes to eligibility and priority for CSPP. The last TA session was a great success, and we're working on responses to many questions that we received. So we're looking forward to this next session. And then finally, the CDE is in the final stages of approving the management bulletin on serving children with disabilities or children with exceptional needs. The management bulletin will include information on number 1, a change to the definition of children with exceptional needs. Number 2, categorical eligibility for children with exceptional needs. Number 3, the enrollment requirement set aside. Number 4, the enrollment priority. Number 5, the increased adjustment factor. Number 6, new data collection requirements. And number 7, the requirement that children with exceptional needs be educated in the least restrictive environment. So we will have a webinar on that guidance on Thursday, January 26th from 10 to 11 in the morning. No registration is needed, and we will put the information in the chat now about that webinar. Thank you so much, and I'm going to pass the mic virtually to Shanna.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you everyone for spending part of your afternoon with us. I am going to speak to us about the UPK Mixed Delivery Quality and Access Workgroup. The CDE has been tasked with convening a new public workgroup per Education Code section 8202.6 in consultation with the Director of Social Services and the Executive Director of the State Board of Education. As part of a statewide collaborative effort, the CDE has welcomed the partnership of the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, CTC. We are calling this the UPK Mixed Delivery Quality and Access Workgroup. This workgroup will provide recommendations in 2 areas. They are, number 1, recommendations on best practices for increasing access to high quality universal preschool programs offered through a mixed delivery model that provide equitable learning experiences across a variety of settings. The second area that the workgroup will provide recommendations on is updating preschool standards pursuant to Education Code 8203. For the purposes of this workgroup, per statute, a mixed delivery system is defined as a system of early childhood education services delivered through a variety of providers and programs, which includes Head Start agencies, public and private community-based organizations, local educational agencies that offer preschool programs, tribal preschools, and family childcare through a family childcare home education network. Because of the specific and narrow focus described in statute, our task with this work group is to identify how our programs who are currently required to meet Title V can implement best practices to increase access to these programs, including through partnerships with the broader ELC community, how ELC providers who want to meet these requirements can be supported to do so, and how changes to Section 8203 of Education Code can support both increased access and quality. This work group is being convened under the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act of 1967 and will be open to the public to listen and provide public comment. Agendas will be posted on the CDE website. The first meeting will be on January 26, 2023, and subsequent meetings will be held monthly on the 4th Thursday of each month. We are teeing up researchers, child development experts, data experts, and others to create presentations on various topics for the work group in order to inform our discussions and ultimately the recommendations. This month's meeting will focus on unpacking the scope and charge of the work group, as well as understanding why the UPK Mixed Delivery Quality and Access Work Group is focused on high quality universal preschool, what evidence supports the need for high quality universal preschool, what are the current limitations to measuring elements of quality. Until at least July of 2023, these meetings will be held virtually. So as we invite your participation, please visit the CDE website to access the agenda postings which hold the meeting Zoom links. And now I will pass it back to our moderator, John.
Great, thank you, Shanna. So we appreciate all the questions that are coming in right now in our Q&A so far. And now we're going to take some time to answer all of them live, or I should say as many as we can live. However, if your question isn't answered during this webinar, please do remember that we are using your questions to inform the guidance that we are developing in management bulletins, as well as our upcoming FAQs. So with that, there's a few questions that have come in regards to how to use COLA. So I'm going to hand the mic to Virginia, who will be answering this question live.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So folks may remember that last year's budget had a COLA and not every county got it because of the way that the statute was written. So at this point, we don't know whether the governor is proposing any changes to the way the statute is written or not. So we'll be looking pretty carefully. As I mentioned, that trailer bill language, is that bill language, those changes to statute that trail the budget, they're connected to the budget, that you need them to implement the budget. We'll be looking very closely at that when it's released in February. Without having the trailer bill language, we can't say for sure, exactly what the COLA proposal would mean. But if the statutory language were to stay the same as it is currently, and if the governor does not propose any changes to it, then it would likely be a situation where not all counties would receive it. So, but again, we don't know, we don't have the full details of the proposal yet because we haven't seen the language. So I think we'll know a lot more when we get to that. I'm going to drop the link in the chat to where folks can find the trailer bill language when it gets posted. Now, if you go to this link now, you're going to find everything from last year. So don't click on it and confuse yourself. It's not going to be posted until February 1st. But starting February 1st, you can go and click this link, hit the education button, and then you'll see the different trailer bill things. And make sure that, if it says updated, March 2022, you're looking at last year. So just pay careful attention to make sure you're looking at the updated one. Like I said, they have not updated this page yet. So a lot of the pieces on the COLA is going to come. Because we don't have the language, typically COLAs are effectively increases to the rates, which contractors can use how they decide to use them. But because we don't have language, we don't know whether there would be any additional rules related to the COLA for this year or not. So we're really kind of waiting to see that language February 1st. And then just a reminder, February 1st is still a proposal. So even if the language comes out one way, the legislature has to talk about it in hearings. Obviously they hear from people in their constituency about issues that matter to them. And then the final budget doesn't necessarily perfectly match what comes out in February. So it's always important to understand that until we have a signed budget, everything that we're talking about is a proposal.
Great, thank you, Virginia, for saying that. We did have another question about the whole harmless. I don't know if you addressed that already, or if you want to expand on that, because we had a few questions on that.
I have not addressed it, and I'm happy to talk to it. So at this point, what we have gotten is the governor's budget summary, which Eddie, if you scroll up in the chat, Eddie put the link to it in the chat around 4:13 p.m. And I can repaste that link in the chat if anyone joined after then. But this is the summary that we have so far. The summary does not mention anything about the hold harmless. Sometimes things get put in trailer bill that aren't in the summary, but our understanding is that there is not a hold harmless, and there's not a proposal around the waiver of family fees. So the hold harmless proposals were really temporary, one-time proposals And in the absence of that, then it would go back to how it operated before the pandemic.
Great. Thank you, Virginia, for addressing that question too. The other question that we've been getting quite a bit in the chat is in regards to the ratio, the 12-to-1 ratio, and if that indeed is either going to stay the same or if it's going to change. And for that question, I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague, Stacy, who's going to elaborate a little bit more about that.
Hi, sorry, I was kind of hoping that Virginia could maybe touch on it since she presented on the topic and we got a lot of questions after the slide.
Okay, sounds good. I just saw that.
That's okay. Thanks, John.
You were jumping in there. Okay, no problem.
So our understanding is that the funding that's been appropriated is essentially covering that extra staff member for all of the kids that are newly eligible for TK this year. So for all the kids this year, meaning this coming year, starting July 1st. So all the children with birthdays between February 2nd, April 2nd that weren't previously eligible for TK, making sure there's enough money for a second adult in those classrooms. The reason I think there are some questions about this is that statute says that it's the intent of the legislature to get to 1 to 10 over time, but that's not currently being proposed. The money, the appropriation is at this point is for 1 to 12. Now that wouldn't stop a school district if they wanted to offer 1 to 10 from offering 1 to 10, but the funding that's being provided is to support the 1 to 12, and the 1 to 12 is the requirement. There were some things in the budget, like I mentioned, that facilities funding that due to the state's revenue picture were sort of pushed off a year. So it's possible that the 1 to 10 would come next year, but they haven't given indication about the plan for that.
Thanks, Virginia, for that. I see one question here about if we could just give a, oh, go ahead, sorry.
So I see the way that some of these 1 to 12 questions are framed as, are we officially staying? So I just, again, need to very clearly say, like, everything that I just said is a proposal. We don't know what the actual law will be and what the actual funding will be until the legislature has passed something and the governor has signed it. So at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I just want to make sure that everyone's really clear on that, because sometimes the governor proposes things and the legislature has other ideas. Sometimes they're immediately aligned from the start, and sometimes there's discussion and things evolve. So, and sometimes that evolution happens because people like you call your elected representatives. So I just want to be really clear, like, these are the proposals. This is the proposal at this moment, but we don't know what the official final thing is yet.
Great, thank you, Virginia, for that. So the other question that I'm seeing here in the chat is about the set aside requirement. So I'm going to pass the mic to Jennifer, who's going to provide a little bit more information about that.
Thanks so much, John. So we will review this information at the webinar, but I wanted to share that the set aside for children with exceptional needs for this fiscal year 2022-23 is 5%, and it increases to 7.5% for fiscal year 2023-24. And then starting in 2024-25, the set aside will be at least 10%, and it will stay at 10%. And this percentage, the set aside percentage, is a set aside percentage for enrolling children with exceptional needs into your program. So, and the percent is based on your funded enrollment. So there is a calculator on the EENFS webpage, and I can grab that to put it in the chat so that can help you calculate your set aside. But this year you are expected to set aside and reserve at least 5% of your funded enrollment for children with exceptional needs. If you have any further questions on that, you could go ahead and put it in the Q&A and I will answer them. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right. So I still see some more posts here, which is great. Thank you for typing your questions. So I do see a question here about the percentage of special needs required for non-subsidized children count towards the total number of percentage. I don't know if anyone wants to take that on, any of my colleagues.
I'm seeing the question here, John. Thank you so much. So for children to count in the set aside, they need to be enrolled in CSPP. So I will go ahead and type up that answer. But remember, there is going to be a waiver process that will come out in 2026. The CDE is working on developing that. Okay, thanks again, John.
No, thank you. All right, so we have one here about the grant status. Not sure if anyone wants to take that one on.
I can feel that, John.
Great,
All
thank you,
right.
Stephen.
Thank you. And yeah, you can't tell this is your first time. You're doing wonderful, John. So for the EAP, the Inclusive Early Education Expansion Program grant, so CDE, we're still working through the RFA, the request for applications. Our goal is to have the RFA released here late winter, early spring. And of course, accompanying that will be a webinar to kind of walk folks through walk folks through it, as well as the announcement. The announcement will go out to subscribers of our distribution list.
Great, thank you, Stephen. So we do have a question here about the answer to the exceptional needs. Not sure if Jennifer, if you don't mind just going over that one again.
Sure. So can you tell me what time that question was, John? Oh, I see. How long do we have to set aside the 5% at 4:37? Thanks. So for the entire fiscal year from July 1st, 2022 until June 30th, 2023, you have to set aside that 5%. Starting July 1st, 2023, you will set aside and hold 7.5%. And just a reminder, statute allows you to be funded for your set aside, even if your set aside is not filled. So that funding can help you pay for recruitment for children with exceptional needs, or if you need to have meetings with your LEA on how to enroll more children, you can do that. And then how are you supposed to be documenting the 5% set aside? I'm actually going to call on EENFS for that question about documenting their set aside amount. And for EENFS, I think that Yashima's in here, or Corey. Oh, I see Corey. Thanks, Corey.
So the documentation will be defined within the management bulletin that is released. It really is like a programmatic file requirement, I guess I should say. And sorry if you hear a bunch of noise in the background. So I would say wait for the management bulletin to be released. I think at minimum, Jennifer, isn't it like they have to have the IEP or IFSP on file? And as long as they are considered a child with disabilities, that you could then report them within the appropriate categories on the enrollment, attendance, and fiscal report, which would then provide you with the additional reimbursement.
Great, thank you, Jennifer and Corey, for that response. So now we have another question about CSPP in relation to an RFA. So for that, I'm hoping that Jennifer, again, if you could elaborate a little bit about that. Actually, I'm sorry, not Jennifer, Stephen, thank you.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, so we've had a few questions in here about when will CDE release funding for the California State Preschool Program, and it's come in a couple of different formats. One for community-based organizations, and then just in general for CSPP RFA. So for folks, in case you weren't aware, the way the California State Preschool Program is funded, it's funded out of two different buckets. One is a Prop 98 bucket, which is available directly to local educational agencies, and then one is a non-Prop 98 bucket, which is available to community-based organizations, sometimes referred to as non-LEAs. We prefer the term community-based organizations, though. We have the legislature last year appropriated funding for CSPP that are LEA-based. The legislature has not appropriated funding for state preschool expansion for community-based organizations for a couple of years now. We always love releasing RFAs for funding for CSPP expansion. We want to see more state preschool programs throughout California, reaching many of those deserts and such, reaching more families, giving more options. So we are looking at releasing an RFA with some of the Prop 98 funding from last year's appropriation. That will probably not happen until the spring, as we had to prioritize our efforts on the continued funding application and making sure that we had that we had things in place so that we could release contracts in time for next year. So we are looking at releasing an RFA for the California State Preschool Program. It's Prop 98 funded, so it would be available directly to go to LEAs. But it's also a good note to remind that a community-based organization can work with an LEA to be funded to operate a CSPP. You'd have that subcontracting relationship, but yeah, that's definitely an option and something that we support and encourage and are willing to help in any way we can if folks are interested in that model when funding is out.
Great, thank you, Stephen, for that. So we do have another question here. Can we set aside also include children in referral processes waiting for assessment by local special education agencies? For that one, I'm going to pass the mic to Virginia to answer it.
Perfect. And I think I'll start, and then Jennifer, I'll ask you if there's anything I'm missing. So the management bulletin will provide a lot more like specificity, and like I think Jennifer mentioned, it's very close to being finalized. Essentially, it sort of depends on the specific situations. If the child has an IFSP and it's sort of going through the process of transferring from an IFSP to an IEP, then until the IEP determination is made, they can continue to count as a child with exceptional needs. However, if the child hasn't had an IFSP and is going through the process to get an IEP for the first time, they do not count as a child with exceptional needs until they have an IEP in place. And Jennifer, let me know, did I get that right? Anything? Do you want to add anything?
That was all great information. Thank you so much, Virginia. So to reiterate what Virginia said, if it's a child that is already enrolled in your program and is going through the referral process, they do not count towards the set aside. They do not get the adjustment factor until they have that active IEP. If they enroll with an active IFSP and they're waiting for the IEP, then they can count towards the set aside and get that adjustment factor. Thanks so much, Virginia, for taking that initially. Okay, back to you, John.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Virginia, for that. Let's see. So thank you again for you folks putting in your questions.
John, I wanted to just kind of chime in here because I do know there are a couple of questions that are open that we have not addressed here. Some of them, frankly, we've got to take back. Like there's some folks that are within CDE that we want to consult with and chat with before we respond to them. So just wanted to note that there.
No, thank you, Stephen, for saying that. And just to reiterate again, if we don't get to your question this afternoon, please do know that we will include it in forthcoming guidance, whether it be in a management bulletin or an upcoming FAQ. So I do see we do have another question here in regards to exceptional needs. Providing if a child has special needs diagnosis. And for that, I'm going to call on Jennifer to respond.
Thank you so much, John. So we use the definition from Education Code 8205H. The definition of child with exceptional needs is a child with an active IEP and receiving services. So unfortunately, if a child only has a psych eval or a medical diagnosis, but they do not have an IEP, they do not count as a child with exceptional needs. You can use that documentation when you send a referral to the LEA, but other than that, that child would not count towards the set aside or count as getting the adjustment factor. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I do see another question here about family fee. Not sure if any of my colleagues want to jump in if we can answer that question.
What was the question about family fees, John? What time is that one?
That one.
I think that Danielle and Susan Salk have been going back and forth on at 4:48 is the most recent one. I don't know if Danielle's available. I can also try to help as well. And you're muted, Danielle.
I was reading Susan's next question. If you want to answer the first one while I look at the second one to see if there's anything to add.
Perfect. So essentially what Susan asked is they have a family that came in essentially and based on when they were enrolled and when the family fee schedule was available at certification, they used essentially the DSS fee schedule. And so now that Management Bulletin 2207 is out and the fee schedule is out, should they reassess the fees for families or wait until certification? And so just a reminder that families can request to recalculate their income anytime to reduce their family fee, and their Title V regulations on how to do this, section 17756. I don't know, Danielle, if there's anything else you want to add on this one from the follow-up question. I think it sounds like it's switching the fee schedule.
Yeah, and so with that switching the fee schedule, Susan, I think the issue is with once a family is assessed a fee, once they're certified for the program, they're certified that for their entire certification. So unless the contract, or I'm sorry, unless the family requests a change to that schedule or their certification, the contractor can't just go and automatically make changes, even if the fee schedule changes. If the fee schedule changes and you notice that a family could benefit or they would have a lower fee, we 100% encourage contractors to say, hey, if you want to request in writing that we reassess your fee, please do so, and we can hopefully get you a lower family fee. You're more than welcome to do that. We would totally encourage that, but it's not an automatic process because of 24-month eligibility and previously 12-month eligibility. It ensures that that families get those services for the same certification without any changes unless it's requested by them.
Great, thank you, Virginia and Danielle. And I believe there's another question here in regards to fees about contractors. I don't know, Virginia, if you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll call on Danielle in case there's anything that I missed. But essentially, yes, contractors can't automatically reduce the fee. It used to be that they could, but with 12-month eligibility and now 24-month eligibility, because of the way that statute is written, the parent has to request any changes. So, but like Danielle said, you can sort of point out to the family, oh, if you request, you'll have a lower fee, and then the family can do that and get their fee lowered as a result.
Thanks, Virginia. I see here another question about RFA applications on how to fill them. Not sure if any of my colleagues can respond to that question.
I can try. So the question, how do I get my filled RFA application to put in a board approved document? So we don't there's not a current offering right now for a request for applications. So the way that you would be notified, one way you'd be notified of the RFA opportunity is we would send a notice out to subscribers of the distribution list. But I'm wondering maybe if you mean continued funding application, because that's what we did. That's what we're working on now. So maybe if Colette, if you wouldn't mind maybe following up with a Q&A that to confirm that you're asking about the RFA versus the CFA.
Great, thank you, Steve. All right, I think we have time for maybe one more question. And the question could be about the deadline for spending ARPA. Don't know if my colleagues, either Kate or Alan, can take it on.
Or maybe Carly?
I think maybe that's one we can take back. And I don't know if there's anything else that we want to add around that, but I think it sounds like the question is the final deadline to spend down funds from ARPA. I will say that it sounds like maybe conflicting info, so maybe reaching out to your fiscal analyst to sort of ask them specific questions about your specific situation.
Thank you, Virginia. Well, with that, I believe we're going to move on to the next stage of our webinar. And just to mention that if we were not able to answer your questions today, please do know that we are going to take these back, and it will inform the guidance within our bulletins and within our FAQs. So now, before we end today, I'd like to highlight a few resources for you all today. In order to find your assigned PQI Office Regional Consultant, please visit the website https://www.cde.ca.gov/sp/CI/assignments.asp. Consultants are going to be most easily reached by email. To find your assigned early education and nutrition services fiscal consultant analyst, please visit www.cde.ca.gov/FG/AA/CD/FAAD.ASP. For any regulation related questions, you can reach out to your PQI regional consultant or email the EED Title V inbox at eedtitle5@cde.ca.gov. If you email the Title V inbox, please include your agency name and county. And now I'd like to pass the mic back to Steve to close us out. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you, team, for all of the work you did on this webinar and the guidance. And I want to thank all of our participants here for these the wealth of questions that we got today. And like John said, we're going to do our best to do the appropriate follow-up internally and get answers back. And just really yeah, anyway, just a lot of appreciation for everybody's time today. Hope everyone's new year is off to a happy start, and looking forward to a great one as we're kicking off this new year. Your strength and passion have helped us get to where we are today, and you know, it's going to be that that driver, that motivation. And of course, our love for children and families, that's going to keep us going beyond. So thank you for your dedication, your commitment, and love for this beautiful work.